అలా రావట్లేదు. నేను సోర్స్ విండో క్యాప్చర్ కొట్టాను కదా, అది డిలీట్ చేసేయచ్చా?
Yeah. Please mute your microphones and your webcams, please.
అదే అంటున్నాను.
I think there is still some echo. Let's go.
వాట్సాప్
I have actually chosen this topic.
ఒక్క నిమిషం
When there is a lot of
వాట్సాప్ వెబ్ ఓపెన్ చేశాను, స్కాన్ చేస్తాను.
work going on in the technical aspects of climate science, the benefits of the improvement in our capabilities, knowledge, and the facilities are not being optimally utilized in dealing with climate-related decision making by various sectors and even with the general public. So this is where I think the climate services play a role. In fact, I should maybe give a kind of disclaimer in the beginning that my talk will not have much of technical information. So though I am now in charge of the monsoon office here, I am not going to talk much about monsoon technical aspects, but it will be more in terms of organizing our work to actually to benefit the society. So that's why you can actually take it easy. It will be relatively light in terms of the technical part. But at the same time,
అవి మైక్రోఫోన్ అలా చేయకూడదు కదా
yes, aspect that I
గూగుల్ మీట్.
provide will be thought-provoking and help you to think in a different direction. Even for students, this will be a very important area because there is a lot of
Join now, Patna.
that are taking place in the climate services. So this may not be purely academic, but at the same time there is a tremendous amount of opportunities that are likely to come as part of the climate services development. So in that sense, I think it's useful for the students also to be aware of what is going on. In fact, before I start, I would like to actually presentations and also the talks by the registrar and also the principal in the inaugural function, which actually provide an excellent background for my presentation. Yesterday we have seen the registrar and the principal actually highlighting the role of climate in everyday life and how people are looking for information to help them to take decisions. Dr. Professor Goswami, in his excellent presentation, has actually brought us to understand the rapid advances that are taking place in our scientific capabilities. And in fact, I was particularly delighted to see his confident statement that the potential predictability of the monsoon is much higher than what we have imagined. So these are excellent background informations, and we can see that there are different aspects that we need to do to bridge the expectations that are highlighted by the registrar and the principal and the capabilities that were highlighted by Professor Goswami. How do we bring these two things together? So this is where I think the climate services will play the role. Another thing I would like to mention at the beginning is to actually pay homage to my guide, late Professor Subbaramaya. In fact, I would like to narrate an anecdote which actually is quite relevant to the present topic. See, way back in 1976, almost 45 years back, when I completed my master's and then looking for a PhD problem. Then, as you know, most students will look for guidance from the teachers to suggest a topic that is interesting and interesting to work on, and at the same time help in your career development. So, as most of you know, Professor Subramaya was an excellent, well-known synoptic meteorologist. So when I went to him, he actually thought about it for a while and said, since I had taken agricultural meteorology as one of my specializations in my master's, so he said he would like me to work on agricultural meteorology. So he never had worked in agricultural meteorology, and he had absolutely no idea of agricultural meteorology. So then he said, let us combine our areas of interest. So you are interested in agricultural meteorology because you took that as special subject, and I have a lot of experience in synoptic meteorology. So let us see how we can actually develop weather-related information that is applicable to agricultural decision making. So this is how he actually combined these two things, and I went on to work on crop weather relationships. In fact, since he had no idea about these issues, in fact, he said that we will learn together, and then we actually started about that. So the most important aspect of this initial days of my work was that since we were dealing with agriculture, so we had to actually approach the agricultural scientists, the agricultural universities. I went to crop research stations, agricultural economists. So it's completely went beyond the domain of the typical meteorological discipline. So this is how actually I really admire the visionary kind of guidance that Professor Subramaya gave me, which actually is benefiting me even today. So I really am grateful to that experience, and I am also grateful to Andhra University for my formative years, which actually laid my foundation to be able to contribute in some way. And that is the kind of beginning that we had. And as you see, as you go through my presentation, you will see that the same initial ideas are relevant even today. In that, in climate services, it is not confined to meteorological discipline. So you need to go out and establish partnerships with various stakeholders, and then only you can actually make sure that whatever information that you are providing benefits the end user. During the last 13 years, almost 13 years, during my stay with WMO, it also gave me another dimension in climate services. That is, as you know, climate knows no political boundaries. Yesterday we spoke, Dr. Goswami told us about the role of ENSO and even North Atlantic situations. So in that sense, we need a different type of partnership, that is global partnerships. So things happening far removed from us can actually impact what is happening within our location. So this is where my experience with WMO helped me to actually address that particular dimension, which also will be covered in my presentation in many ways. So these are some of the early remarks that I wanted to make, and let's go for the presentation. So this is an old schematic. In fact, this is taken from the third assessment report of the IPCC, but I really like this way of representing. So what essentially we ask, what we essentially ask are three fundamental questions when we deal with this. Of course, is in the context of climate change, but these questions are applicable to even climate variability, even season to season variations. So what we need to ask is what changes have occurred in the past. So these are essentially provided to us by the observations and our experience. Observations don't mean that the data. Observations also mean information that is stored in historical archives, even descriptions and stories and things like that. And how well know that we know what changes have occurred, how well are the past and even the ongoing present changes we understand, both in terms of observations and also in terms of the various models that we have built, various types of simulations that we have been able to incorporate our understanding into those simulations. That is the second question. And based on this understanding, what can we say about the future? So these are the three fundamental questions that actually sum up everything that we do in climate science. And that is where, since we know that climate impacts almost every aspect of our life, knowing about what is likely to happen into the future is important for us to take the right decisions and be prepared for the impacts. Another important aspect that I would like to draw your attention to is the so-called precautionary principle, which is actually adopted by the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. The principle essentially means that we don't need to wait for things to be perfect. We know we don't, as yesterday Professor Goswami highlighted, there are still many gaps in our understanding, in our capabilities to predict the future. But at the same time, given that some of the aspects really threaten or cause serious or irreversible damage to the society, we can't afford to wait for things to be perfect and things to be 100% reliable. So in that sense, I think we need to make use of whatever information, whatever capabilities that we have, even though it is not 100% correct, but knowing that there are uncertainties and there are gaps in our understanding, and we should actually start trying to apply that information. So that is why we should not be apologetic if something goes wrong, some forecast doesn't happen, or if we give a false alarm. So these are part of weather forecasting or even climate forecasting that we know, but that is part of the science, and I think we should not allow anybody to use that to undermine the value of the information that we are providing. So those are the, I think, fundamental issues that we have to keep in mind while looking at the climate services. So the main emerging opportunity is that we have the potential to improve the societal response and also support sustainable development. This is mainly done in terms of providing the relevant climate information to enhance policy and decision making. These significant diversity in the supply and demand of this type of climate information. And providers, whoever is producing and providing this information, they also sometimes when users may not be understanding or they don't even know they need to pick up to apply it. So on both the sides, I demand in the current information. That is another thing that we need to use to address as part of the, that also is Commission of Climatology, Commission for Climatology. WMO Commission for Climatology, those who are familiar, used to be one of the technical commissions of WMO, guiding all the climate-related work. So that gives you kind of the seriousness of the situation. And what are the forecasts saying, either sub-seasonal forecast or seasonal forecast? And what measures based on this information? And also, are we monitoring what is happening currently.
ఇది
So
డిస్ప్లే
are
క్యాప్చర్
there
ఓకే చేస్తున్నాను అది ఓకే
mechanisms to monitor current status of the
audio
climate
mixer ఉంది.
in real time
Desktop
so that
audio
we know
mixer
what is
audio.
happening currently. So these are part of the climate monitoring and assessment, which is again an important element. And then the future.
ఓకే ఓకే
So
ఆడియో డెస్క్టాప్ ఆడియోను మిక్సర్ ఆడియో రెండు మ్యూట్ చేసి
piece of information that you can use in risk management at the city level. So can you get easy access to these forecasts for the location of your interest? Because we know there are so many types of predictions forecasts available. So what are the forecasts that you can access that are relevant to your particular decision context? So this is where the future information that you need to understand. And once you have this historical context and also some element of assessment and future, how do we assess the risk of the drought continuing? How do you apply that information to determine the current risk, to determine the seriousness of the current risk? And what are the options do you have that you have the clients or customers, but you can say where people are the impacted community. So you need to work with them, because without working with them, you don't know what exactly is to be done to manage these risks. So this is where the user interface comes in, and also the adaptation options, which are not typically part of climate science. These are socio-economic issues. There are many other issues that come into play, and this is where you need to partner with the sectoral users and develop this particular aspect. And then finally, the capacity development that applies to, as I mentioned earlier, of both providers and users, where you should make sure that you have the essential infrastructure to produce and access this information. And also, the people should be properly trained or made aware of the various types of information. So these are the 5 aspects that the WMO Commission for Climatology used to focus on to mainly support the development of climate services. So based on this kind of foundational work done by the Commission for Climatology and also various other branches of climate within the WMO community, there was a conference way back in 2009. This is called World Climate Conference 3, where a global framework for climate services was established with a high-level declaration attended by a number of heads of state and high-level ministers. The global framework for climate services was established with the overarching goal of enabling better management of the risks of climate variability and change, and also to support adaptation to climate change at all levels through the development of science-based climate information and prediction into planning, policy, and practice. So here there are the 2 fundamental aspects that we should keep in mind. The information should be science-based, and the information should be actionable. So we are not providing this information as an academic piece of information. These should be acted upon. These should be given in such a way that people can take actions based on this to help them in various managements of risks and adaptation aspects. So that is the basis of developing the climate services, and that is how we actually see a major thrust in developing climate services at the global level. So before we go into the details, I think it is useful to understand what are climate services. Essentially, climate services involve the consolidation of knowledge about the past, present, and future of the climate system, and identification of the type and form of services,
and and also about the information about the climate and also its impacts, and then develop and deliver these products the application of these. So this is essentially, in a nutshell, what we mean by climate services. And we also need to keep a few key definitions in mind. By climate data, we mean all historical and real-time climate observations, as well as the model outputs, even into the future. So everything is climate data. It's not, many times people tend to see only observations provide climate data. Everything is climate data, anything that you can provide. And in addition to that data, we also need information on the metadata, what is called the descriptions of these data sets, what they actually are, what are their limitations, what are their strengths. So those aspects also should be accompanied by the climate data. This is actually an important part. And there is a climate product, which is actually a synthesis of climate data, either in the historical context or hello.
Please your microphones, please.
And then climate information is actually a collection of all these things, data, products, and also the knowledge. And the service is essentially to provide information that can help decision making. A service requires appropriate engagement along with effective access mechanism, and it must respond to the user needs. And there are also a number of prerequisites for climate services. These are the key prerequisites that should be satisfied by climate services to be in an ideal situation. They should be available at time and space scales that the user needs. As you know, for example, if a farmer wants to prepare for the monsoon, he cannot use the All India monsoon forecast given by IMD. So he needs information at the time and space scale that he needs for his farm. So that's why its availability at time and space scales of a specific user is very important. And then there should be dependable, delivered regularly on time, information that is sporadically available, or whenever somebody gets interest, they produce the information and provide. That is not going to be useful. It should be delivered regularly and in time for the decision making that is required. And it should be usable. It should be presented in user-specific formats that the users can easily understand. So many times, if you give potential verticity, nobody can understand. So those are the things that we have to keep in mind, that they should be provided in specific formats that the users can understand and easily apply. And they should be credible for the users to confidently apply to decision making. So the credibility is very important because if information, even if you are providing, if they don't trust this information, they will hesitate in applying in any decision making that involves some cost. Because see, at the user level, even if you give a good forecast, to actually apply that, he actually may be required to put in some additional cost for which he needs some kind of guarantee that this information is going to help him. So that is where credibility comes into picture. And authenticity is another very important issue. And the information, whatever people are using, they should be entitled to use that. For this, actually, I'll give you an example. If there is a weather-based crop insurance, the insurer, whoever is providing the insurance, and also the insured, the farmer, both should agree that some information is the basis for them to settle their claims. So they should agree. So for this, authenticity is important. So if the information used by the insurance company is not trusted or is not considered authentic by the farmer, then there is a dispute. So it is very important to maintain authenticity of the information. And in most cases, the governmental agencies, the official weather forecasting or climate forecasting agency provides this authenticity so that in case of any claims or disputes, the authenticity establishes who should be supported. So that's where the authenticity is very, very important. And the services should be responsive and flexible, because we know that user needs evolve with the society develops. So the needs also evolve, and we should be we cannot freeze a particular type of service to the current need. And they should be sustainable, and they should be affordable and consistent over time. So these are the essential prerequisites for climate services that we need to keep in mind. And the need for a framework is mainly because there is a kind of increasing recognition that the present capabilities of the providing climate services, they don't exploit all that we know about climate. As we have seen yesterday, there is a lot of information that is available. There's a lot of knowledge that we are improving, but at the same time, all these advances and improvements are not reaching the beneficiaries. So that is where I think we have to address to make sure that it reaches everybody. And it's mainly because the present capabilities fall far short of meeting the current and future needs. And particularly in developing countries, they need to work, do a lot of work in delivering their full and potential benefits. So for this purpose, a framework for climate services can be used to build on the existing capacities, because we are not building new structures. We already have a lot of capabilities that provide various bits and pieces of infrastructure or capacities required for climate services. So we have to build on those existing capacities, and wherever there are gaps, we have to find ways to address those gaps. So the framework is essentially envisaged as a set of international agreements to coordinate the global activities, because much of the climate services philosophy is very similar, though in most countries, though the specific context may be different. So it's important for us to make sure that we have a uniform set, like weather services. Those who are routinely using weather forecasts, so they didn't occur just like that. So there was a lot of work that was done to put together the international arrangements to collect data in a standardized format and to exchange that information and to prepare the forecast. So there's a similar exercise has to be done in climate services as well. But because of the need to closely work with the user sectors, we need a different type of arrangement, and that is where the framework will help to put together that kind of arrangements, both on an international scale and also on multi-sectoral scales. And of course, the Met services, the NMHSS, that is National Meteorological and Hydrological Services, are the key building blocks for the framework, because most of the climate information is in the domain of the NMHSS. So the global framework for climate services that was established at the World Climate Conference 3 has essentially what we call the pillars, the 5 pillars or components. The top level is the user interface platform, which actually is the means to interact with users, user representatives. and also to help them to work with the climate researchers and climate service providers to understand the various aspects. And then the climate services information system, I will be going into this in greater detail in the subsequent slides. It is the operational center of the global framework where all the information is collected, processed, and distributed as per the requirements. And of course, these two are the essential links with the climate services, the top level links, but they are supported by two foundations. One is observations and monitoring, where we need to take continuously all the required climate observations that are required for climate services, and also we have to keep monitoring the climate variability and change, and of course the research, modeling, and prediction. That is where most of the information is actually the innovative approaches are developed to assess and also to predict the climate. So that is another foundation. So based on the inputs provided by the observations and monitoring and research, modeling, and prediction, the climate services information system, what it does is to routinely apply these inputs to provide the products that are required by the users. And the capacity building is a kind of overarching component because there is a recognition that our capacities are not uniform across many countries in all the aspects. Even observations and monitoring research also, there are serious capacity gaps we need to address. So that's why there is a kind of an overarching capacity building pillar that addresses those issues. The global framework was actually further developed after the World Climate Conference 3 by a high-level task force which worked for about a year or so and developed and produced a report which actually provides the fundamental aspects of the global framework. That is available on the WMA website. Those who are interested can go through that. So one element of that report is the characterization of 8 guiding principles, which the high-level task force wanted all the stakeholders to keep in mind. So these are the priority for the most vulnerable. So because we know that the vulnerability or exposure to climate risks is not uniform across socioeconomic streams or across geographical regions. So it's important for us to identify the most vulnerable and give priority to those sections. And to maximize the use of climate services, this is because it is very clear that the use of climate services is very low, even in some of the very developed countries. And the third principle is that the information should be at least structured on 3 levels: global, regional, and national, knowing that even for a local type of information, you need information, you need inputs from the global and regional scales. So this has to be done in a systematic and comprehensive way at the 3 levels. And it should be operational. It's not a one-off type of activity. It should be an operational system. And the climate services is a public good, though there may be a lot of private participation. Essentially, it should be public good because we know that the general public is affected by the climate anomalies. And for this, automatically you need, particularly for the global, regional, national level organization, you need to maximize data exchange. That is very important for us to keep in mind. And there should be no duplication because we already have a lot of existing infrastructures and we should not try to build the same things again and again. So we should build upon the existing capacities and avoid any duplication. And finally, the partnerships, as I highlighted earlier, in climate services particularly, there is a strong need for partnerships because many of the climate sensitive sectors are managed by various other agencies, and we need to work with them to make sure that we provide targeted and tailored information to the users. The global framework was established with a very good governance mechanism to make sure that it is implemented in a sustainable way. Of course, the governance is at the top level is the World Meteorological Congress, which actually is the governing body for WMO as well. So the Congress actually took it upon itself, all the governance aspects. Initially, there was what is known as an Intergovernmental Board on Climate Services that was constituted by the Congress to help initiate the global framework and establish. But following a midterm review, there was a recognition that the Intergovernmental Board is not necessary. So the Congress has decided to disband the Intergovernmental Board, and it has appointed a climate coordination panel. So this year onwards, this climate coordination panel will look after the GFCS governance. And by the way, the Intergovernmental Board on Climate Services had a strong participation from India. In fact, even from the very initial stages, even from the World Climate Conference 3, India played a major role in guiding the initial arrangements. And in fact, the Intergovernmental Board had Dr. Rathod, the former DGM, elected as one of the co-vice chairs of the Intergovernmental Board. So in that sense, I think we can be proud that we played a major role in the development of the global framework. There is also a partnership advisory committee. A number of partners are part of this, which are providing the user-related inputs into the development of the climate services. And the whole thing is managed by the WMO Secretariat. Initially, there used to be a GFCS office, but now it has been merged into the regular Secretariat. So the Secretariat actually is, in fact, I used to be partly supporting the global framework as part of my responsibilities. So that is the type of governance that we have in the implementation of the global framework. So these are the partners. This is just a small collection of the logos of the partners. So you can see that there is a lot of high-level participation, particularly at the global level, that are supporting this global framework. So these partners provide the inputs from the sectoral point of view so that we can actually design products that can be applied in specific decision making at the sectoral level. The GFCS initially, of course, there is an understanding and recognition that there are many climate sensitive sectors all of which should be tackled. But the initial phases, the GFCS agreed to focus on 5 sectors: agriculture and food security, disaster risk reduction, water, health, and energy. So these are the sectors that are being addressed in the initial stages. So let us go through the pillars that I have mentioned earlier quickly. One is the user interface platform, which essentially allows to get feedback from the users and also supports the dialogue and evaluation of the effectiveness of the information that is provided and helps in the outreach. I'll get into the regional climate outlook forums at a later stage, regional or national climate outlook forums. So these are platforms or forums there where you can actually bring climate information providers and users together so that they can collaboratively discuss and determine the best way to generate and apply climate information. So this is actually a new area which in many countries and many regions we don't have a properly established mechanism. I think this is something that there's a lot of work is still to be done, but it is recognized as part of the GFCS that this is a new area that we need to work with the partners to develop. And the climate services information system, it is mainly the physical infrastructure, including the climate services toolkit, where you have a number of tools that can be used to produce the information. And essentially, it is ability, particularly on local and national scales, to draw on the global and regional inputs that are provided and produce locally specific information. And promoting free and open exchange of data, so that is an important aspect, and also apply standards, protocols, and schedules, including quality control, archiving, and subsequent access. So these are very important. WMO is of course well known for establishing standards and also implementing them. So this is very important to make sure that we provide high quality data. And also there are a number of other issues that I will not go into the details. So the climate service information system is essentially the place where the information is produced routinely and supplied to the users based on the various types of inputs. Observations and monitoring. So the existing national capabilities for observations and arrangements for data exchange, of course, will provide the starting point at the national level and also exchange at the global level. But at the same time, we need to recognize that in many places, the observations, particularly of climate standards. So climate standards, they need some specific characteristics to make sure that the data are homogeneous and long-term. So, and also the density of the observations. So we know that there are large gaps in some areas, particularly in Africa. We have to recognize that the gaps in the observational data, not only within our national boundary, but even globally, is of importance for us. Because if observations in some specific area that have teleconnections with our location, so then lack of observations in that area will have a consequence for us. So it's important for us to actually drive a major thrust or support a major thrust in the improvement in the observational network. And of course, the data management with quality assurance, the archives and rescue, so those are also part of the observations and monitoring. The research, modeling, and prediction pillar, this improves mainly to improve the scientific knowledge and science-based climate information, and develop innovative methods and improve practical applications, and also design products. And there is also a need for applied research because this is where I think it's not just enough for us to improve the prediction skills or climate diagnostic skills. We should also try to see what are the parameters that are of most importance in terms of supporting the decision making, or in terms of estimating the impacts at the user level. So those are also issues that should receive proper attention in the research. And of course, the World Climate Research Program has been a key partner in developing this particular pillar. And this is where the research, the additional dimensions of research required to support climate services are addressed here. And finally, the capacity development. the capacity development has four key areas. One is, of course, the human capacity, where you need competencies at different levels to make sure that we have the right human resources engaged in developing the various pillars of the GFCS. And the infrastructural capacity, that is the computational infrastructure or the observational infrastructure, etc. So this is the kind of hardware type of capacity that is to be developed. And the procedural capacity, which is mainly the methods, the procedures that we use in generating the climate information. So those also should be improved. In many cases, we see that people don't have access to advanced procedures, with the result that their capacity to use the latest techniques is limited. So those are the various procedural capacities also we have to address. And then in the institutional capacity, this is particularly translates to mandates. In many countries, we have seen that the mandates of some of the climate information providers is not adequate. For example, if there is a health sector, in fact, even in some of the developed countries, this has been found to be a major issue. I'll give you an example. In 2003, there was a major heat wave in Europe that people may be familiar. So in France, there were tens of thousands of deaths because of the heat wave. And when they actually analyzed the root causes for this type of situation, they realized that there were indeed forecasts available. The Met Service did give the forecast for the heat wave sufficiently in advance, but nobody in the health service actually paid attention to them. So this is where the mandates come into play, where so based on this experience, in France, they have now created a vigilance system where it is mandatory for the health service to access the heat forecast and document actions that needed to be taken. So this is where the institutional capacities, both on the provider side, there should be mandate of what type of information they should provide. And from the user side, they should also be mandated to use this information to take specific actions. So this is where the institutional capacities also need to be improved. And this is a major issue that, of course, it can be done only within the governmental framework. So each country has its own political and governmental context. So they should try and see, based on the international discussions, and how they can actually adapt this particular aspect into their internal governmental arrangements. So the capacity development should address both demand and supply side. I mentioned this earlier, and should be service oriented and respond to user needs and be balanced with the climate science capabilities. And of course, the national Met services are the key institution that underpin the GFCS. In fact, they have been traditionally providing a number of climate services, and they are mandated by the WMO Convention to provide all sorts of information on weather and climate. And they have the structured and training infrastructure for providing 24/7 services. And they are also experienced in applying all the standards. And another thing that we have to keep in mind is that from the user side, they don't really care who is producing what. So they come and ask the same questions about weather and climate in a kind of interchangeable way, in a seamless way. And if you can't ask them to go to different places for different types of information. So it's useful to have a single window where they can pick up all the information that they need related to weather and climate. And NMHS can effectively provide that kind of single window. Of course, the NMHS also have NMHS for India, it is IMD. IMD and its partners, they have a large pool of technical expertise and dealing with weather and climate, so which is a big resource that can underpin the GFCS implementation. So in the overarching implementation, essentially is of a kind of three parts. One part is providing priority applications. First part is providing priority applications in the various sectors that were identified, and then developing the foundational pillars that are part of the provision of the information, and then bridging these two groups. So this is where I think most of the GFCS implementation focuses on. And at the final level, so it's actually the value chain. If you can see that the weather, climate, water, this information that is being provided, it has to end in kind of a socio-economic value in terms of costs and benefits in all the key sectors. So in this, the service production is essentially the CSIS, that Climate Service Information System, which we will go into greater detail now. Is basically, should be followed by the basic and specialized services, the user decisions and actions and outcomes, which are, as we go towards the value, you have an increased participation from the sectoral side. So, the initial thrust is given by the weather and climate information, but as we go towards the user, it needs to be further supplemented with a lot of user inputs that only can give us the full value chain that can be addressed. WMO is actually documenting the state of the climate services on a regular basis. In fact, last year, they supplied this state of climate services, particularly focused on agriculture and food security, of course, with a number of partners. So you can actually access this report and see for yourself how these activities are developing. And now we'll quickly go through the climate service information system that is part of that is actually, I think, mostly concerned with the meteorological and hydrological community. The CSIS is the main operational center of the GFCS, where most of the information is produced, particularly on weather and climate timescales. And it has a kind of infrastructure layout, if you remember, the global, regional, and national level. So initially, starting with the data, it goes into analysis, monitoring, prediction, and projection. And then through a number of mechanisms at all the levels, and also through interactive platforms like regional climate outlook forums and national climate outlook forums, the information finally reaches the users at different levels. So most of the entities are well defined, and we are actually working towards implementing them in a global scale, and also making sure that the national level stakeholders are able to adequately derive benefits out of these arrangements. So the implementation strategy is essentially to define the functional characteristics of the various types of climate information in terms of data, monitoring, prediction, and projection. I also would like to make a small point about prediction and projection. Many times people don't recognize the difference between the two. An easy way to understand this is that in prediction, you have no way of influencing the outcome. So when you receive a prediction, most of the factors that go into the prediction are out of your control. Whereas in a projection, you normally get a scenario. So if you do this, this will happen. So if you don't care about greenhouse gas concentration and work business as usual, you will end up like this. Or if you are very conservative and cut down everything, you will be here. So these are projections are where that gives an option or a capability for you to actually to influence the outcome. So projections should not be taken as predictions. So that is where you have to make the users understand the difference between these two. So many times when I have seen a lot of users using projection information as prediction and also already preparing for that kind of eventuality. So those are the things that we have to keep in mind. So this is where you actually make sure that the CSIS provides this information with that kind of understanding. And there is another part of strategy is the development of the operational infrastructure. We have a number of centers that are part of the WMO system that provide the operational infrastructure. And there is also a climate services toolkit that is also being populated by the WMO, and of course the capacity development. So what is the CSIS structure and what does it do? As you know, we know that the climate spectrum, starting from historical past, even paleoclimatic time scale, to climate change time scale. Don't try to read the small text just to indicate that the climate spectrum is so wide. And we know that there are different types of products for different discrete areas of the spectrum. You have past climate data, you have the monitoring information, you have the subseasonal to seasonal forecast, you have the interannual forecast, you have multi-decadal forecast, and you have climate change projections. So we have different types of products across the spectrum. And then the service delivery should be at the country level and also at the global level. For global level scale policy making, we also need to provide some global scale information. And the output, the various types of output, both at the country level and at the global level, are flexibly generated at multiple levels. Sometimes you have global information that is further regionalized at regional level and then applied at the national level. Or sometimes the global information is directly taken by the countries and applied at the national level. Or sometimes you only have global information, you don't have any national level information. So this is how the outputs are produced in a very flexible way, and additional value is provided at the country level. And finally, the service delivery happens at the country level because we know that most of the information at the action level is done at the country level. And what are the products that are, what are the capabilities that we are trying to support? So there is a lot of activity that is going on in data rescue, homogenization, and also quality control of the data sets. And there is climate data management system. WMO is actually providing an open source climate database management system that can be implemented by countries. And there is a lot of effort that is going on in national scale reanalysis. Even IMD has, NCMRWF has come out with high resolution reanalysis. And there are also blended products where reanalysis products can be combined with satellite-based and conventional products to provide high resolution data sets. And there is also an effort to create station inventories and metadata and have review of requirements. And in terms of forecast, you have the severe weather forecast, the flood forecast, the climate watches, you can give warnings about extremes, subseasonal to seasonal forecast, annual to decadal climate predictions, climate change projections, including downscaling, and hazard analysis, drought monitoring, flood warnings, and probabilities of key threshold exceedance, and there may be others. And more importantly, there are also tools for developing these types of various types of data and products. So this is all part of the CSIS that is being addressed. At the global level, as part of the CSIS, WMO is implementing what are known as global producing centers. We already have about 13. In fact, one additional center is coming up. So there will be 14 global producing centers which produce global seasonal forecasts on a routine scale. Almost every month, in the middle of the month, they produce this forecast, and these are archived at a WMO lead center for multimodal ensemble. And those who are interested can actually go to the website. Most of the forecasts, at least the graphical products, are in the public domain, so you can actually see even the forecast for India. Many models are there, so you can actually see that there are many types of forecasts which need to be consolidated. And there are also global producing centers for annual to decadal climate prediction. This is actually located in UK Met Office. A number of centers are producing annual to decadal climate forecasts and giving to UK Met Office to archive to coordinate their archival and dissemination. And there are also Global Producing Center for Subseasonal Forecast. This is still not there, but it is likely to be implemented in a few months' time. And there are also proposals for Global Producing Centers for data and monitoring. So with these global scale infrastructure, I think CSIS will have a strong input in terms of global information. And we also have established a number of regional climate centers. I will not go into details. I only want to mention that India has a WMO recognized or WMO designated regional climate center in Pune as part of the IMD setup, where a number of regional products, IMD, this regional climate center provides the products for South Asia. And there are also what are known as regional climate outlook forums, where the forums meet sometime before the key seasons and then look at the various types of forecast products that are available and then produce a consensus-based outlook that can be applied or further downscaled at the country level. For example, India leads the implementation of South Asian Climate Outlook Forum, which is called SASCOF. So similarly, you can see that the whole globe is covered with these forums. They are very actively discussing the various aspects. And I am associated with many of these COFs, and in fact, some of the COFs were started during my tenure in WMO. One particular forum that I really am very satisfied is the Arctic Climate Forum that is actually implemented by all the Arctic Council countries, member countries. The speciality or the uniqueness of that forum is that it was formed by highly advanced developed countries like the United States, Canada, Norway, Russia. So these countries, they don't really need any capacity input. But at the same time, what they recognized was that there is a value in working on a regional scale in a collaborative way to share experiences and also to bring innovative approaches for a pan-Arctic view of the climate. So the Arctic Climate Forum has started, and it's working very well. And they are producing really innovative products like CSIS forecasts and other related products that are relevant for the Arctic. So you can see that this kind of forum, it also provides opportunities for users to join these discussions and understand the climate elements and also communicate their own requirements on how the climate information providers can address their needs. And WMO has also adopted a resolution for open data exchange, which are required for climate services. So this resolution was adopted by the Congress, means that all the countries have agreed for this type of data exchange, and it is hoped that with this type of open data exchange, there will be a lot of improvement in the availability of the data for different sectors. So this is another slide that is very busy, so I don't bother to go into the details. This is actually was developed by one of my interns when I was in WMO. I asked her to prepare an inventory of all the data that are available for applications in climate services. And when she realized, purely based on public domain data sets, she prepared a kind of almost 200-page document, which she tried to summarize in this table. What it shows is that there is a huge amount of data that are available at different levels and on different timescales and across the climate spectrum. But when we see the actual use of these data sets is really suboptimal. So that is what has been highlighted in many ways in WMO discussions, that we need really a strong initiative to help make best use of the available data sets for climate services. And for this, the regional approach is considered to be the right approach, where though we are still focused on country-level results-based framework for the GFCS, a focused regional effort is required, mainly because we know that many countries share common climate drivers, and it is important for these countries to adopt consistent approaches. There are a number of building blocks. Since in the interest of time, I'll go quickly through this. Essentially, the CSIS core functions that we have seen, the same aspects will apply here also, but only what we do is we regionally tailor these projects to make sure that we apply them in a regionally specific context. So this is the approach. So at the global level, we have the global activities where they consolidate the inputs that are coming from the nations through regional scale. The data comes in, and then using the data, they produce the forecast and other products, and they are again sent back to the countries. So at the country level, mostly the effort is on developing the tailored products where user targeted products are generated. And this is mainly facilitated by what is known as a climate services toolkit. And as part of the toolkit, I'll give just two examples. This is WMO recommended procedures for long-range forecasts, where from global forecasts, how you regionalize and then produce local forecasts. There are specific guidance provided as part of this. And there is also a software developed for generating sector-specific indices, climate indices based on raw data. These are also some of the tools that are being made available to the community, which can be very useful in terms of sector-specific indices. And this is the South Asian Climate Outlook Forum that I mentioned earlier, where India is playing a leadership role. And in fact, based on the GFCS discussion, I think India also has been quite proactive. I don't know whether Ramesh is here. So Ramesh actually initiated a special arrangement within IMD. He has established what is known as Office of Climate Research and Services in Pune, which is actually taking care of this type of climate services activity on a regional scale, which can actually be useful for us also to help the neighboring countries. And there is also a lot of user involvement in these forums. There are also some user-specific forums for water, health, and agriculture that were organized, which helped us to partner with the user sectors to understand their needs. And at the national level, of course, I will skip this. Physical, yeah. So at the national level, what I want to highlight is the need for working together with the national agencies, national and local communities, universities, and other research institutions. And the national climate outlook forums can be very useful mechanisms. In India, we have started in some way, but I think this has to be further upscaled to cover, because India, we have so many states with different languages. It's very important for us to organize this type of forums, which is very important for developing climate services in India. So in terms of key messages, what I would like to highlight is that there is definitely limited use of climate information, and we need to improve access and also enable better climate-related risk management in a multidisciplinary context, and also with a lot of international collaboration. And we also need to enhance capacities at different levels, particularly at the national level. And the way forward, particularly with the Indian context, the RCC Pune is very active, and there is also an initiative for the Himalayan region, which is called Third Pole RCC Network. And we have at IITM the Cortex South Asia. So in terms of RCC capabilities, I think we are in a good shape. And there is also the SASCOF, which has to be further improved. In fact, even to consider not just seasonal outlook, but even many other types of climate information that are useful for climate services. And co-production of information required for climate services, and there should be more user forums with different sectors to facilitate that co-production. And the national CSIS implementation, including the national climate forums, that also needs to be highlighted. And in particular, I would like to, particularly for a suggestion, a proposal that I can make for Andhra University is to develop a state-level climate forum, probably in Telugu language, that can actually help, because we have so many people who are former students of Andhra University who can contribute to that kind of forum. And if this forum can be made a regular platform, particularly mainly in collaboration with the state government agencies, for that type of proposal. So I do encourage both students and the faculty from the Andhra University to seriously look into that. Of course, we need